Welcome into Duval Daily, presented by GenJag.com. I'm Jordan DeLugo. Thanks so much for tuning in here on Monday, July 31st. Was not able to get out to training camp this morning for training camp day 5 for the Jacksonville Jaguars, which is the last day of training camp practice before full pads come on. I was watching baby DeLugo this morning, making sure he's doing all right, so was not able to get out there, but did want to drop some content for y'all today, kind of a look at what we've seen from training camp so far, top 5 standout performers, and this is going to be guys that we haven't talked about in terms of the last episode that we dropped on here was the top 5 takeaways from training camp so far. Each one of those takeaways kind of involved a player, so we're not going to talk about those players here on this show today. It's going to be new players talking about what they've done, how they've stood out to me, and what their potential roles could be for the Jaguars in 2023 moving forward. Obviously, very early in training camp here. These players still have a lot to prove. Most of them are young guys. In fact, all of them that we're going to talk about here today are young guys that I think have stood out for one reason or another, and they'll need to continue to perform at a high level to be able to have an impact for the Jaguars. Some of them are going to be fighting for roster spots, some of them fighting for playing time. We'll dive into it, but if you enjoy the content here on Duval Daily, presented by GenJag.com, please hit that like and subscribe button, notification bell so you don't miss a show on here. If you want to support the channel further, you can check out GenJag.com/shop, pick up some new Duval gear. Really appreciate y'all tuning in. So we'll start off at the tight end position. The Jaguars, I think they're likely to keep 4 tight ends. And the guy we're going to mention here, Garrett Prince, I think is one of those 4 tight ends. You definitely look at Evan Ingram and Brenton Strange, the Jaguars' second-round pick, as locks to make the roster. I think personally Luke Farrell is also a lock to make the roster. And when you look at what those players bring to the tight end room, you look at Evan Ingram. He is that move tight end, the F tight end in this offense, a guy that is going to be heavily featured in the passing game, but will be asked to do some blocking in certain situations. And then you look at Brenton Strange. I think he's kind of a hybrid, but more of a Y tight end who can also be a H back, who can also line up in the slot, move around and do different things for you. But I think you bring him in and he's a guy that can definitely be a really good blocker on the end of the line of scrimmage, and especially in space, getting out there and moving as a blocker, creating space for ball carriers, for guys that catch the passes on screens, for jet sweeps, all that type of fun stuff. But Luke Farrell, a Y tight end for sure for the Jaguars. And then you talk about Garrett Prince, who is one of these standouts I'm talking about. He has caught 3 touchdown passes in the first week of training camp for the Jaguars, which you just don't see that a lot from tight ends, especially not tight ends who are even first, second, or third on your depth chart. And he definitely comes in as an F tight end for the Jaguars, a move tight end, more in the mold of an Evan Ingram. He's a really good athlete, scored a bunch of touchdowns at UAB. You can get him the ball in a variety of different ways, and he can use his speed and athleticism. What you have seen so far, though, is he's not dropping the football. When Trevor Lawrence is giving him an opportunity to go make a play in the end zone, he's coming down with the ball, and he's able to beat guys like Trey Herndon and other DBs that have been covering him. So I think Garrett Prince has certainly stood out. Again, very early. They have not been practicing with pads, with full pads, anything like that. So tight end position, it's a position where you're going to have physicality. Even as a receiver, there's going to be guys in the slot trying to jam you up, linebackers trying to hit you. So performing at this level once the pads come on and once you get into preseason, which is now just less than a couple weeks away, Jaguars' first preseason game, you want to see Garrett Prince continue this. But heading into training camp, the Jaguars had spoken highly of Garrett Prince, and now with this performance, catching everything thrown his way, looking like a good route runner, looking like someone who will come down in the end zone with the football for you, I think he's definitely in line for that 4th tight end spot behind Evan Ingram, Brenton Strange, and Luke Farrell. And, if they only keep 3 tight ends, who would it be between Farrell and Prince? I think that's yet to be determined. I think they really like Farrell, though, and I think they will keep 4, to be quite honest with you. So I don't think it's going to end up being an issue there for the Jaguars. But Garrett Prince, a move tight end who can definitely create some mismatch situations for you on the offensive side of the ball, as long as he continues to perform the way he has in year 2 as a former undrafted free agent in 2022. And the next guy is someone we have talked about a lot on this channel. Pretty much every training camp recap that I've done. He's come up, but Parker Washington again looked really good today. I was not out there, but saw a lot of clips from Jamal and some of the other guys, and you saw Parker hauling in some one-handed catches, looking smooth as a route runner. That is going to be his calling card, being able to get open, create separation, and catch the football when it comes his way. He's got some of the strongest hands in the draft. This past draft, the Jaguars were able to get him on day 3, a guy that should have been a day 2 pick all the way. And you look at what his role can be for the Jaguars in 2023. Obviously, they have a stacked wide receiver room, so it's going to be a little bit difficult for him to break through. I do think he will make the 53-man roster without question, but what can he do for the Jaguars? What role can he serve as a rookie? I think obviously if there was any injuries, he can certainly step in at the slot position and perform at a high level. But even if there are no injuries, I think Parker Washington can get on the field for the offense. The Jaguars do a bunch of stuff with bunch formations, with condensed formations. I think he can be a really effective receiver for you in those situations from the jump. I think he can be really effective as a receiver that you kind of line up in the backfield. You saw the Jaguars flirt with that a little bit in 2022. Christian Kirk lined up in the backfield a little bit. You saw that a couple other times as well. I think Jamal Agnew may have lined up in the backfield. But I think Parker Washington, with his frame at 5'10", over 200 pounds, he's got real thickness, real strength and power in his frame. And adding that to how smooth he is and quick he is in and out of his breaks and how good of a receiver he is in terms of his ball skills, I think you could do a lot to create mismatches with getting him in the backfield. And so you're going to get him lined up one-on-one sometimes in man situations with linebackers, with safeties. And I think he's going to be a mismatch problem in those types of situations for those guys because of his ability as a receiver, because of the physicality and quickness he can bring to the field. And I think you can also see him on special teams, no doubt about it. He's a guy that has punt return chops, in my opinion, a guy that obviously Jamal Agnew is the starter at returner, but I think Parker Washington can be your number 2. I think he can do a lot for you on special teams. So I think you will see him on special teams in 2023. I think you'll see him in some certain designer packages for the Jaguars in 2023 on the offensive side of the ball as well. Now, these next 2 are really exciting because they can kind of play the same position but in different settings. It's Gregory Jr. and Antonio Johnson. And Gregory Jr., he's a guy that coming out of Wichita Baptist in 2022, the Jaguars selected him on day 3 of the draft. He is not the biggest corner. He's about 5'11", little under 200 pounds, right around 200 pounds, but a really, really good athlete at the position. Has almost a 40-inch vertical, a 4.4 40-yard dash. He's quick, he's explosive, he's athletic, and he's the type of guy that can compete for nickel reps for the Jaguars. Trey Herndon is the incumbent starter at nickel for the Jags, but I think a guy like Gregory Jr. can come in and bring more athleticism to the field, more speed and quickness to the field, and potentially just be a little bit stickier in man coverage than a guy like Trey Herndon can be. Trey Herndon, very good against the run, very good in zone coverage, but I think if you're trying to run more man looks, Gregory Jr. could come in and be that guy that can just stick with someone from the slot a little bit better. Some of these speedy, athletic slot receivers that are in the league today. So I think that could be really fun if he's able to continue this level of play that you've seen the first few days from him of training camp for the Jaguars. Looks like he's taking that year 2 jump. Coming out of a small school, it can be very difficult to make that transition to the NFL. It looks like he's doing a good job after sticking around on the practice squad in 2022 of taking that year 2 leap like we mentioned, and you're going to have to see it continue once the pads come on into the preseason as well, because there's a lot of competition at that spot. Beyond Antonio Johnson, who we're also going to talk about, beyond Trey Herndon, you've also got Christian Braswell, you've also got Eric Hallett, some other guys competing for reps there. And talking about Antonio Johnson, though, I think he's really stood out in a big way. He recorded the first interception of training camp off of C.J. Beathard a couple days ago on Saturday and housed it. I think that if Gregory Jr. is the guy that can get out there and cover some of those speedy, quicker, faster slot receivers, Antonio Johnson is the one where if you're facing a team that's going to have a tight end or a jumbo slot lined up in that in that slot position quite a lot, then you can see Antonio Johnson kind of go man-to-man with those guys, also drop into zones and play well. And we haven't even seen the best part of Antonio Johnson's game yet, which is his ability to fire downhill and lay big hits and force fumbles, which is a really fun aspect of his game. But I definitely think the combination of Trey Herndon, Gregory Jr., and Antonio Johnson can give the Jaguars a little bit more versatility, a little bit more ways to pivot at the slot position in 2023 than they had in 2022. I think that could help them out a lot. Just from week to week, game to game, you're going to be facing teams that have different skill sets, different game plans, and having those three guys and, potentially Christian Braswell, Eric Hallett as well, to be able to compete there will help this team, I think, in 2023. And finally, we've got another receiver to go along with Parker Washington, and it is Elijah Cooks, the rookie receiver, undrafted free agent out of San Jose State. Scored 10 touchdowns for San Jose State last year after transferring over there, and he's a guy that won a lot on the deep ball, won a lot on the outside, on the 9 route, just straight up the field. And you've seen some of that from him, his ability to win vertically for the Jaguars. He has a different frame and a different skill set than pretty much anyone else in the Jaguars wide receiver room right now. You don't have the smallest receiver room on the planet, but Christian Kirk is obviously a smaller slot type receiver. Calvin Ridley, even though he is an outside receiver that you can move around and do a lot of different things with, he's not one of the bigger outside receivers in the league, right? So you look at him, the top two, and then Zay Jones, he's got some decent size to him. He's about 6'1", 6'2". He's over 200 pounds, but not a big receiver either. Jamal Agnew is not a big receiver. Parker Washington's not a big receiver. Tim Jones has decent size, kind of like Zay Jones, but not an overly big receiver. So who is your jump ball winner? Well, Calvin Ridley can definitely do that for you. Zay Jones can do some of that for you. But Elijah Cooks, this young receiver, he's been catching everything thrown his way, and he's 6'4", 215 pounds, and he's a guy that has shown the ability in college to win deep down the field, to win on contested catch situations, and you've seen that a few times now in training camp so far. I think 1010XL posted one earlier where he was able to go moss the defensive back, go up and over the DB in a one-on-one situation. And I just think that he presents a different skill set than anyone else that's currently in the Jaguars wide receiver room. And the NFL teams, they usually keep 6 receivers. That's the most common number at that spot on the 53-man roster. If you look at the top 6, I think it's pretty close to locked in. Like, you've got your top 3, no question about it, and Calvin, Zay, and Christian. You've obviously got Jamal Agnew, who's not going anywhere, one of the best return men in the league, and also a guy who is a quality offensive piece. And then I think Parker Washington is a lock to make the roster. He's too talented to try to stash on the practice squad without question, in my opinion. And then you've also got Tim Jones, who the Jaguars kept last year on the 53. He's a glue guy, a guy that will get out there and do the dirty work. He will block his ass off. He will compete on special teams at a really high level. So how do you get a guy like an Elijah Cook on the roster who does present that different skill set? Do you keep 7? Do you move on from Tim Jones? Do you try to stash Cooks on the practice squad? Obviously, the way these guys perform in preseason games is going to have a major impact on the back of the roster. And he's not the only guy that has looked good at wide receiver, quite frankly. I think Kendrick Pryor has a lot of talent, and he led the NFL in preseason in 2022 in receiving. And then you also talk about Kevin Austin. He's got all the physical tools in the world. He looks a lot more comfortable right now than he did last year at this point in terms of being able to consistently catch the ball. It hasn't been perfect for Kevin Austin, but you've seen more splash plays from him in training camp so far this year. So I think you've got a fun battle at the back end of the receiver room, and whether the Jaguars keep 6, whether they maybe are able to keep 7 receivers and go light at a different position, I'm not sure how they're going to play it out, but there's a lot of competition to make the back end of the roster at receiver and at a lot of other spots that you're definitely going to see more as the pads come on. You'll be able to see more from the offensive line and the defensive line, the linebackers and the running backs, really get more physical out there. When preseason comes around, you'll see that as well, more physicality than what you're seeing in practice. And so that's where offensive linemen, defensive linemen, linebackers, running backs, safeties, where they can really kind of show what they can bring to the table a little bit more. But I definitely think Elijah Cooks has proven that he was a good investment as an undrafted free agent for the Jaguars. He brings that different skill set to the roster. right now, the 90-man roster, and we'll see if he can compete to stick around on the 53. I would say right now he's been one of the more impressive young players that they have, certainly on the offensive side of the ball at wide receiver. But that will do it for our 5 standouts from training camp so far. Really appreciate y'all tuning in. You can hit me up on Twitter at Jordan DeLugo. Let me know what you think. You can also follow Generation Jaguar at Generation Jag on Twitter. Hit that like and subscribe button, notification bell so you don't miss a show, and check out genjag.com/shop. Pick up some new Duval gear. Y'all have a good one.